Most of you know that from the little advertisement set out. So I'm going to keep this fairly informal because you already have all the answers in front of you. We made kind of a worksheet so you could take some notes, and to also remind me that I want to do this in a certain order, but not really. So as we go through, if you have questions, write them down. We'll absolutely have time for questions at the end. And then, did Katie also give you the sheet with, hi, come in. Did Katie also give you the sheet with the recipes on it? Yeah. You have that? Okay, good. Okay, good. So, the first thing I want to sort of cover, check in on is that the topics about the immune system, and the most important thing I think that I want to remind myself of and you of is that when we adjust patients all day long, we talk a lot about neck pain and back pain and headaches. We have a lot of patients with vertigo. We have a lot of patients with a variety of other tingle, numbness symptoms. But we also have this wall of children on the hallway who don't show up to our office and say, Mom, I have a pain in my neck, or Mom, my hip hurts. Their parents bring them into the office to get their nervous system checked so that they are healthy and healthier throughout the course of their little lives. And so that to me is sort of the best example of how our nervous system, with what we do with adjusting, connects to our immune system, because that's the reason we have that wall, is to support their nervous system via adjusting, and because we do that, we know that they get sick less often. We know that our adult population who gets adjusted on a regular basis gets sick less often. So that means less head colds, less food poisoning, less trips to the hospital, less trips to their primary care practitioners, less lots of things. And we have all kinds of research to support that, and I'm not going to go through any of that because it's not very fun to go through all of that, first of all. But what I want to do is go through just like the basic anatomy of how that works or why that works. So when we're in anatomy, one of the things we always learn is that the nerve and the artery and the vein travel together. The fourth piece of what travels together all throughout the body, like in great big arteries and veins and nerves, and then little tiny small arteries and veins and nerves, the fourth piece of that is your lymphatic system. Does anyone know what the lymphatic system is or does? Like basics? Raise a hand. The lymphatic system is kind of your immune system, but it's sort of the garbage cleanup system. It's the part of your body that takes the waste products as they've been filtered through your organs and tissues and brings them back and dumps them back into, hi Deb, come on in. It dumps them back into like your liver and your GI tract to process all of the goop and the garbage to get it out of your system. The deal with the lymphatic system is that it doesn't have its own circulatory system. Like the heart pumps blood around the circulatory system, and so the arteries and veins have something to push all that blood through. The nerves are controlled by electricity, really. They're controlled by electrolytes, and we're going to get to that in a few minutes, and I have a little recipe to go along with that. The nerves are controlled by electrolytes, and of course controlled by the brain, brainstem, and spinal cord, and that's what we talk a lot about, of course, in chiropractic care. But then the lymphatic system is sort of this passive system that requires movement to function well and function properly. And so one of the things we're going to do tonight is a little tiny twisting exercise. It's kind of toward the bottom of your list. That keeps your lymphatic system moving, but it's a really easy way to do it. And it's a thing, it's a little movement exercise I learned in yoga like 25 years ago when I was first introduced to Kundalini yoga. So I love it, and it's one of my favorite things. So in terms of what's on your list, let's go to the first thing we talk about is adjustments, okay? The second thing on your list is bones, and it's not the bones in your body. If you look at your recipe list, I want to talk a little bit about bone broth. And I love, bone broth is one of my favorite things to support the immune system. And it's kind of a pain in the buns to make because it takes a long time to make. But once you make it, first of all, it's really super simple to make because you just sort of put it all in a thing and let it sit for a long time. And then once it's made, I have some nice ideas about how to use it on a little bit more of a regular basis. rather than having to make it like every day or every week or every regularly once you use it up. So there's 3 different kinds of sort of liquids that go in soups and stews and things. And there's stock, and then there's broth, and then there's like a bone broth, which is kind of the best one of all of them, I think. Stock is like the watery stuff that you can get at the grocery store. It doesn't turn gelatinous once you make it. It's pretty thin. It takes a couple of hours to cook. And stock is mostly from like the meat, and then sort of vegetables and spices that you put into the water, and then boil it for like 2 or 3 hours. And then when it's finished, it's just kind of this watery thing that you can put other things into to make it taste better for you. So it doesn't have a lot of the goodness of the bones that bone marrow does, or the knuckles and all the other kind of chunky pieces of bone that you can get from the butcher do. And that's what is, or that's the second layer of the 3 of those that I think is kind of the easiest one, and that's the recipe I gave you, is that bone stock. So when you make that, you use vegetables and spices, whatever you sort of like in there, and then you also use like the knuckles and the marrow. So they're chunkier pieces. Usually when I make this, I don't put it in a stock pot on the kitchen stove, because I don't want to watch it for 8 hours. I usually just stick it in my crock pot overnight. And once that's finished, you get kind of a jelly mixture. Like once it's cooled to room temperature, it's sort of a gelatinous mixture, because the goodness from the marrow and the goodness from the knuckles and the other stuff from the bones and the vegetables and the spices have been leached out, and then it turns into kind of a gel. Hi, come on in. Hey. It turns into sort of a gel, and that's the part that I like that's so good for you. And it's really good for your immune system, because one of the things that's in there is stuff that repairs the lining of the gut. So what we're doing with bone broth is we're sort of extracting all of the goodness out of the middle of the bones into the liquid, so we can use it on a daily basis, really. So usually when I make this, what I suggest people do is put it like in an ice cube tray, so you have a whole bunch of broths separated into little tiny cubes, so you don't have to drink like the entire thing in a day or in a meal, but you can have like a cube every day, and you can stick it into things every day, so you have a little bit all the time. And the marrow and the goodness from the bones, all of those minerals and those electrolytes are then in your meal a little bit all the time. It's a really easy way to use that, and that's one of my...
It's minerals and electrolytes?
It's minerals, it's electrolytes, and it's all of the other amino acids that sort of get leached down and broken apart in that long cooking process when we put stuff in heat, and on low heat, like in a crock pot, for a really long time. So it's a nice way to extract all of that. And because bone marrow is where our health comes from, like that's where our blood comes from, and that's where everything that we need transferred from like stem cells. We hear a lot about stem cells now in stem cell therapy. We take all of that goodness and transfer it then into these little cups of bone broth, and we get to use that directly. And what's nice about it is it's so broken down, is it's sort of like baby food. It's sort of like baby food for our gut, because it's so easy to absorb, and rather than these big complex proteins that's often found in ligaments and tissues that we get from animals, that's all sort of boiled apart in it, and we get these little short chain and even individual amino acids, and those are so easy for us to absorb, like in the upper part of our gut. And when we absorb those in the upper part of our gut, that goes right into our bloodstream and then right to our tissues. And so it's just a really nice way to support and boost the immune system, because it doesn't require a lot of energy to digest. And that's one of the things that, especially like in the winter time and when we're stressed during holiday season, and just other things happening right now, what we'll find is that when people use simpler foods, like broken down foods like a broth, they can absorb it easier, better, and so their body doesn't have to work so hard to burn it up. And a lot of times what I'll liken it to is when you get tired from cold outside or lots of work or too much exercise or not enough sleep or whatever it is, what happens is your digestion starts to suffer, and a lot of people say, oh yeah, I get kind of an upset stomach when I get tired, I get an upset stomach when I work too much, I get constipated when I exercise too hard. A lot of different things will happen to our digestive tract, and so to give your digestive tract something really easy to just absorb, like a broth, is a great thing to do on a regular basis to support your immune system, because there's so many little tiny things in that broth that support immunity sort of directly without having to break it down and digest it and then use it. So that's one of my favorite things. Another way to make that, kind of the third layer of making that, is doing like a 24-hour cooking process and procedure. Again, I don't like that, but it's probably the best way to do that, because it allows more time to break down more of the tissues from the vegetables, as well as the bones and the meats and all the other stuff stuck to the tissues. It just gives you more time to get all of that out of the hard products and into the broth, because you're going to throw away all of the leftover vegetables and all the leftover bones once you're done cooking that. That all goes in the garbage, and then you just have this kind of gelatinous magic. So I really like that, and it's an easy way to use that if you just use it a little bit every day. And you can use this you can use this for breakfast. You can cook your eggs in it if you want to. You know, it's just a really nice thing to be able to use really regularly like that. So that's one of my favorite things. The next little recipe I have on there is an electrolyte recipe that's totally different than bone broth, because it's kind of a sweet one. And I have a few different things in there, and I have a handful of options that I added to the bottom of that list. So when I make this, I usually use water, or I do kind of a half water, half coconut water. Coconut water by itself has nice electrolytes in it, but it's fairly high in sugar. So it depends on how sugar sensitive you are, and whether or not you can have it or how much you can have of it. But it's a nice flavor, and it's a nice kind of a soft mineral flavor to it, and it has a little bit of sweetness to it for sure. But what I'll do with it is put a couple cups of the either coconut water or water plus coconut water, and then I dice up usually a lime and or a lemon, or I combine the two of them, and then I'll just blend that down so it completely pulverizes, and then let that whole mixture go through a colander, so I just have the liquid left. There's nothing else there. And then with that liquid, it's just the electrolytes really from the lemons and the limes, and not much sugar depending on the coconut water. And then you can stick in a little bit of honey. Again, I would start small and increase slowly, but you want this a little bit bitey. You want it a little bit citrusy. And then add a little bit of salt and blend it again so everything gets really mixed up. I also really like to put some olive oil in this. If you like macadamia oil or avocado oil, it makes it a little bit sort of thicker or frothier, and it makes it more drinkable, I think, because I like the frothiness of it. And it's a really nice way to get just an even balance of electrolytes. We kind of get scared about salt too often, but the salt that we should be scared about is just the sodium chloride that sits on most tables anywhere. This recipe calls for sea salt, and sea salt is fine. You can have as much sea salt as you want, and it's very self-limiting, because once you salt your food with enough, you're sort of done with it. You're not going to have too much of it, because of the mineral balance ends up balancing itself. And if you really crave salt and crave minerals in general, you probably need more of it. So it does have sea salt in the recipe. I was pretty conservative about how much I put in that electrolyte recipe. I just put an eighth of a teaspoon in there. Again, you can titrate that up, or you can move that up a little bit if it tastes better for you to have a little bit more. And probably in the summertime, like if you're out and sweaty a lot, yard work and running and whatever you're doing, it probably would taste better to have a little bit more salty things. A lot of times when we crave crunchy foods, that's really a craving for minerals, and minerals are really just another way to say electrolytes. Electrolytes are ions. They allow energy to transfer, electricity to transfer, and so when we talk about minerals in the body, we're talking about things like sodium and potassium and chloride and chromium, iodine, all of those minerals we hear about that are good for a variety of organs. And the sea salt has a pretty balanced version of all those electrolytes, and we dump it in there and put it with a little kind of the citrusy juice and a little bit of the coconut water. It balances everything out and it gets absorbed really nicely. It usually feels pretty good in your stomach also, so I like that one quite a bit. What's the fourth one on there? Oh, sleep. Let's talk about sleep a little bit. So, I like talking about sleep because it's way more important than everyone thinks it is. In the last week, so today's Tuesday, since last Wednesday, which is before Thanksgiving, so this is kind of maybe a bad example, but how many people here have slept at least 4 hours a night, every single night in the last week? At least 5. At least 6. Not quite. At least 7. Has anyone slept 8?
Every
A couple
single
good
night?
sleepers.
Every single night?
Every single.
Yeah, really?
How about one of them?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. How about 2 of them? Okay, good. So in general, men need a little bit less sleep than women. Men need about 7 to 8 hours, and women need 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Everyone exists on a spectrum. Most people need that much. Some of us need less. Those people who need less are fine as long as their blood chemistry is healthy, they're not breaking down all the time, they're not getting injured often, they're successful at work, they're successful at home. Like, there's a lot of things you look at if you can say, yeah, I only need 4 hours of sleep and the rest of my life is really good. I'm a disaster if I don't get 8 hours of sleep at least 6 nights a week. And I've tried and I fall apart. Other people are different. They can do really well with less and succeed and still maintain an ideal weight and maintain the, healthy relationships and be happy all day long and be productive. I know where I am, and I think that's a really important thing to figure out where you are and where your health requires you to be. Generally, that's the rule of thumb though. Men need 7, women need 8. So there are a few different parts of sleep cycles, and I think we could spend a ton of time on sleep, but I just want to emphasize mostly how important it is and then how we can talk about it a little bit more eventually. And maybe we'll do like a whole little talk about sleep someday. But sleep is basically broken up into 2 parts. It's the REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, and then the non-REM sleep. And the REM sleep is the part of sleep where you're paralyzed, like your body doesn't move, but your brain is really active. And then the non-REM sleep is kind of opposite of that. Your body is movable, but your brain isn't very active. So they're in the non-REM sleep, the non-dreaming sleep, because the REM is the area of sleep where we dream the most, and that usually happens later in the night. That usually later in that, sort of early in the morning, but later in the sleeping cycle toward morning. There's more dreaming kind of sleep or more REM sleep. Initially, we go through a few different phases of sleep. We go through like a transitional sleep, which is exactly that. We're going from waking to sleeping. You can kind of hear things. There's not a lot of necessarily like physiological benefit, but it's necessary to obviously transition into a light sleep. And light sleep is necessary, and we tend to spend a lot of time there, especially if we're stressed or we're not eating well or lots of other things. It's sort of this phase of sleep that doesn't really do us a lot of good, but we end up staying there too often if we're not healthy enough to get into that deep sleep, which is where our brain restores itself. It's where our brain cleans itself out. It's where our physical body gets its chemistry refreshed. It's a good way to think about it. When we don't get that really solid, strong, deep sleep every night, and it's about 10 to 20% of your sleep, we start to notice physiological impact of that. We start to notice like waking up sleepy or waking up groggy or not making it through your day and lots of other things. So there are tons of apps you can use to monitor and regulate your sleep, monitor and watch what you're doing with your sleep. But there are not a lot of apps that tell you like how to make it better. And how to make it better is like this greater conversation that I think is important to have. But one of the things that I think is really important to do with sleep is to have a really regular schedule. So just to pick a time that you're going to bed early, especially if you feel like you're waking up tired. Typically moving your sleep schedule earlier at night, like if you're used to going to bed at 10:30, move it up to 10:15. Just a little bit might be the difference between you making it all the way through your next day's afternoon and not. I think that's probably the easiest thing for most people to do, to get a little bit more sleep, and sleep is so important for your immune system's health. Because again, that's when you regenerate everything, and if you're not getting that deep, really strong sleep, that's where you'll start to fall apart the next day. And then that may be like the next afternoon when you get tired and then you think you should have a donut and coffee in the afternoon instead of like take a little nap or go to bed earlier the next night, whatever that is. And that deep sleep is usually happens earlier in your sleep cycle. So if you're used to going to sleep at 9, most of your deep sleep is going to happen before like midnight or 1 o'clock. If you're used to going to sleep later than that, first of all, you're probably not getting as much deep sleep as you could get. And then secondly, you're probably not getting enough quality deep sleep when you get there. So going to bed a little bit early makes a huge difference for the quality of sleep you can get and this immune system strength and health that we're trying to do something about tonight. So let's go to that next recipe on there. It's the turmeric tea. Does everyone use turmeric in their cooking? It's that orange spice. Turmeric is a root, right? It's mostly grown in India. Like 80% of it, I think, is grown in India. And it's related to ginger. They look similar, like in the grocery store, they look similar. The difference is when you cut ginger in half, it's kind of whitish and a little bit green, and turmeric is like bright orange. And the active ingredient in turmeric that we're looking for is called curcumin. And curcumin is, it has huge benefit for the sleep and our neuroimmune system. So it has huge benefit just regulating how our immune system works. It doesn't necessarily make it work harder or make it work sort of less aggressively, but it modulates it, so it brings it back to its center, which is really important. Like, we don't want things to upregulate and downregulate, we want them to take care of themselves. A lot like getting adjusted, honestly. Like when we adjust you, we just allow your body to figure out where that center is, like to figure out where that balance is. And that's sort of what curcumin does for the nervous system, and lots of other things do this also. This is just a really potent and powerful one. So curcumin kind of lets the immune system come back to its center, and it does that obviously chemically. So it's an anti-autoimmune kind of support because it does that. It's an anti-inflammatory, and that's why I put it in here, particularly next to sleep, because it's a really nice supplement or food to put into this turmeric tea to have before bedtime. When you use this tea, and when you make this tea, again, I put a variety of extras that you can put into it, but the basics really require a good fatty coconut milk. There are a ton of different coconut milks you can get, and there's all kinds like in the cartons, and I hate every one of them because they're full of weird chemicals that make it actually look like cow's milk. Yeah. So the best kind of coconut milk to get is in the can, and get the whole coconut milk or the full fat coconut milk. Light coconut milk is, the difference between the whole coconut milk and light coconut milk is added water. That's it. Like, it's kind of a scam. And so get the full fat coconut milk. If you want to add water on your own, add water on your own. But those fatty acids found in coconut milk are really easy to digest. They help repair the gut, they support the immune system, and curcumin really likes to be with coconut milk specifically, but also fat in general, because it's easier to absorb and it's easier to digest. That's also the reason there's a little black pepper in that recipe. There's a pinch of pepper because it activates and allows the curcumin to be absorbed better, so it gets into your system better. Other than that, it's a really simple recipe, and I have a couple of other, again, extras on the bottom that you can sort of add to it. It's just a whisking recipe, like right on the stovetop, so it's super simple and easy. And because it's kind of a mixture of some dry ingredients, I usually have like a jar of the dry ingredients mixed together. sort of ready, just because I use it a lot, and it feels really calming at night. Sort of to have almost like with dinner or after dinner, before bedtime, however long that span is for you. Different for everyone. It's pretty short for me. So that one's a really nice immune support, particularly because it helps your nervous system calm and quiet. It helps you get to sleep easier, to get that deep sleep at the beginning of your night, more for a longer period of time, and it coats your digestive tract in a way that feels really soft. I don't know how else to explain or describe that, but if you've never had this before, it's just a nice soft thing to have at nighttime before bed. The other thing I like about it is that it's a nice alternative for kids instead of hot cocoa, which is usually like sugar and, I don't know, Hershey syrup or something. I don't know what they make hot cocoa out of. But if you want a little bit of a cacao powder in there, you can stick a little bit of that in there. I would go easy on it because it does have low caffeine in it. Go easy on it, but it's a nice addition if you want a little bit of a chocolatey flavor, and that's a really good addition there. You can also use cacao butter, so that'll give it kind of a chocolatey flavor without the chocolate in it, but it has that kind of smell of that. It's another option. I don't think I put it on there actually. So the one little exercise thing I mentioned at the beginning that I love, and I'm not gonna have you do it here because you'll knock each other out, is it's an easy twisting exercise. I'll do it here. Oh no, I'll kneel in front of it. It's an easy twisting exercise. So when I was really fortunate. When I was in college, a friend of mine grew up Sikh, and she part of being Sikh was using Kundalini yoga every day as part of her lifestyle. And so when she came to college, she taught it every Sunday afternoon. It was the coolest thing because we had this like amazing lifetime teacher that was just like ingrained in her. And so one of my favorite things about Kundalini is that I couldn't get my brain to calm down when I was in college, and I still don't do great with it, but Kundalini has a lot of, that kind of yoga has a lot of counting and chanting and mantras to it, and a lot of repetitive motions to it. And so it sort of like fills up your brain, so you don't have to worry about clearing it all out, like in a lot of meditative practices. Not that that's how all meditation works, but this one in particular worked really well for me. So the reason it's on here is because your immune system, again, that lymphatic system that flows throughout your entire body, next to the nerves and the arteries and the veins, all over, needs to be moved with physical movement. Just the action of your blood pumping through your veins and arteries helps move your lymphatic fluid through your tissues, but twisting exercises do really, really well at moving that lymph through your tissues, and they also sort of squeeze all your organs and then unsqueeze them, kind of like when you're squeezing a dish rag or a sponge in the kitchen sink, right? That's kind of what they do. And so this particular exercise is a really simple exercise you can do anywhere, and what I'd like you to do is this. Since you're here tonight and it's December 3rd, I'd like everyone to just take like 1 minute a day and do this exercise until the end of the year. And like, I don't care if you do it in the morning or after lunch or before bedtime, it'll feel good whenever. But one of the things that often will fall off of to-do lists when we get really busy is exercise. And like, we need to move our immune system so it works better. We need to move our body so they work better. And we work best when we're moving a lot all day long. Our human beings are designed to do lots of movement all day long. Like, as much as Dr. Brutman and I walk around this office all day long, if I were to sit down for the entire day, it would kill me. Like, because like I would get sick more often, I would be unhappy more often, my back would hurt more often. I mean, we're walking around a lot all day long, but our immune system, our lymphatic systems are supported and stimulated, and so they're constantly getting cleaned out. And that's really with this super simple little exercise, that's really what I want to do, is just give you something that's really easy that you can use like in a minute or 2 or 3 minutes every day until the end of the year to get you through the next several weeks of hustle and bustle, and kind of clean your organs out, and it feels good. So you can do this 2 ways. You can do either seated cross-legged or kneeling, and I'm just gonna kneel because I think I'm a little bit higher if I do it. So if I'm here like this, it depends on how comfortable you are also, kneeling or sitting cross-legged. I don't care if you sit on a chair and do it, but you can't do it here because you're gonna knock each other out. So you can put your hands on your shoulders like this, fingers go forward, and thumbs go behind your shoulders from here. And so again, in Kundalini, they like breathing exercise and they like repetitive stuff. And so we're just gonna turn to the right and then turn to the left. You keep your head in line with your spine when you do this. And as you turn, you're gonna breathe in to the left and then you're gonna breathe out to the right. So it's just like this. And when you do that, you're gonna do it 30 times one way and then you're gonna do it 30 times the other way. And if you do it pretty fast, and it's supposed to happen pretty fast, you're gonna be done in like a minute. So you're just gonna go back and forth super fast like this. Breathe in, breathe out, breathe in, breathe out for about a minute, and that's it. And if you get sleepy at your desk, if you get sleepy at your desk, if you get tired in the middle afternoon, you can't quite make it to the next thing you're gonna do, just do this for 1 minute and it will totally energize your brain and feel so much better for you because it just squeezes all of the goo that's been sitting in your guts, kind of stuck together, and it gets it moving again. It gets your chi moving again. It gets all that energy moving again. It gets all that energy flowing up to your brain again. And it'll tire you out because you're breathing like 60 times in a minute. Like usually you breathe about once every 5 to 10 seconds probably. It depends on how fast or slow you breathe. Like if you breathe 60 times in and out in a minute, like you'll be tired just from doing that, but stimulated at the same time. So it's really important that as things get busy and as we're like talking about or thinking about this immune system health stuff, that you keep movement somehow in your regular program of life. And if this is the way you can do it, great. And the thing is this, with yoga, if you're trying to do the pose, you're in it and you're doing it. So it doesn't matter if you can turn 2 degrees to the left and 2 degrees to the right. It doesn't matter if you can't put your hands on your shoulders and you can put them on your armpits or you can put them on your waist. Wherever you are and however much you can turn is enough. It's just a matter of doing it. And that will be better than not doing it. So the last thing I want to talk about is the supplements, the little list of supplements on the bottom. This is far and away the easiest thing on this whole chart because it doesn't require 8 hours of cooking bone broth or sitting on the floor and doing breathing exercises. The supplements, we put together little packages and we put 3 things in the supplement package. One is a supplement from Progressive Labs and it's a global immune system support. I've used it for years and years. It has some minerals, it has some vitamins, it has some amino acids, and it has some glandulars in it that are just really nice for the immune system. On a regular basis for anyone who would want to take immune system support, like through like the next 3 months of winter time, I would say per body weight, per 50 pounds, I would take 1, which is a pretty solid dose, okay? I wouldn't, I like doing it by body weight because I think I need less than Frank. He's bigger than I am, he gets more. He also gets to eat more food than I do because he's bigger too. So, but that's, what's that?
I think there's space for supplements, but there's not a list of
There's space, yes. The first one I just mentioned is a supplement from Progressive Labs. It's called Collagen Forte. We have them here in the office, and it's just a combination remedy of a variety of things that support the immune system. The second thing is vitamin D. I love vitamin D because it is it's an immune system support in a really powerful way. Every time one of your cells goes through all of its DNA and replicates it, vitamin D is supportive in 10% of those reactions. So it's really important that we have enough of it. And the nice thing about vitamin D is that if you do a blood test and then your levels are low, then you take vitamin D and the levels go up. Like it's a super easy supplement to take, and it's a really easy data marker to change on blood work because you just take it and it goes up. It's so simple. And I like vitamin D with vitamin K. It helps balance the calcium and other mineral movement in the body, and that's really important. And I usually recommend 10,000 units a day for adults. And then the vitamin K that comes with it is about 35 K2 or something like that. It's always balanced with exactly what it needs to be, and I mostly trust the companies to balance that for me because I can't remember the exact number of vitamin K ever. But I like a lot of vitamin D. I think the recommended daily allowance is some miserable little, like, couple hundred or something like that, and it's just not enough. Vitamin D is a really easy blood test to do. So when you do your annual blood work at your doc's office, ask for it. And vitamin D should be roughly room temperature, so you remember it. Like 70 to 80 is a really safe number for vitamin D, and that's a healthy level for it to be. Especially as far north as we are, we will never get enough sunshine, even in the summertime, because we're so far north, and so we just need to take it. It is what it is, and if you want to live here, you have to take vitamin D. Sometimes people need less than 10,000. Sometimes they only need 5, especially in the summertime, or they can take it every other day. But it's an important blood test. It's a super easy, simple, cheap blood test. And if you're not taking it and you live here, you should just start taking it and then test it eventually. And it's the nice part about taking it without testing it is that it's not dangerous. Like, you're not going to hurt yourself taking it. It's safe, and it's so protective. And the third thing that we put in there is, in the package, is a little bottle of silver. So silver is something that naturopaths and natural health care providers have used for a long time. And silver is, it's basically an antimicrobial. It's really easy to absorb, and so we just stick it under the tongue, like you stick a little squirt under the tongue, and you can use it 2 ways. You can use it prophylactically, so a little every day, all the time, to just kind of clean up the system. Or you can use it also if you feel like you have a sore throat coming on, or you feel like your immune system starting to crush and crumble, if you feel like you're getting a little headachy because sinus stuff, whatever that is for you, you can use it in any of those ways. But the easiest way to use it is just you stick a little squirt of it under your tongue, let it sit there for a minute, and you do that a few times a day in an acute situation. In like a prophylactic, I want to just support my immune system and kind of clean things up, get rid of a little bit all the time. You just do a little bit every morning. Super easy, super simple. Again, I like silver because the brand that we use, the Argentine silver from Sovereign Silver, is safe. It's a really clean level of silver, and it can never get to a toxic level. So sometimes heavy metals turn into toxic metals for us, and this can't do that. So it's a really easy, safe way to support your immune system, just like the vitamin D and just like the other multiple immune system, the Collagen Forte that we put in the package for the immune support. And it feels really good. It's just a really easy way to take all of those and put them together, and then give you a little squeeze for your immune system so that everything works a little bit better. So between a little bone broth every day, a little electrolyte juice, which tastes really good in the morning for breakfast, and then a couple other things like sleeping better and some twisty kind of exercises. If you're going to pick an exercise, pick one that you get to twist a little bit, because it really does kind of squeeze out your organs. And the supplements that I just listed. Do you have any questions about the supplements? No?
What's in the, you said the cordyceps?
The supplement name is called Collagen Forte.
Oh, Collagen.
It's
The bottle's
just,
right there if you want.
Yeah.
it's just, it's right behind me.
That's all minerals?
It's minerals, vitamins, it's got some glandulars in it, it's got a few amino acids in it. So it's just a nice combination remedy with a little bit of a bunch of stuff that specifically supports the health of the immune system. It's nice anti-inflammatory, little antioxidant kind of support. Yeah.
The vitamin D that you said that has the vitamin K, doesn't vitamin K affect clotting? And can you
Yep.
take that if you're
That, if you're on something that affects clotting, you have to talk to your medical doctor. That is one thing that I won't touch in conversation. Because usually you're taking like an anti-clotting medicine, and that's a big deal. So it does, the amount that's in it probably doesn't, but I still wouldn't take it without it, regardless. But you have to talk to your doctor about it. Yeah, and I'm sure there's a list of like things and amounts of things that you can and can't have with that. Yeah. Or you could just eat food with it. But the problem is vitamin K doesn't come in very high amounts of many foods. It comes in like natto, which is not a food that we eat. And it comes in brie cheese. That's kind of like the two foods that I know of. I mean, it's in such low amounts in so many other things that taking it as a supplement with vitamin D is kind of the only way I know how to fit it in any significant amount of food. Yeah, yeah. Anything else about the supplements? About the recipes?
Yeah, I have a question
Yeah.
about one of the recipes, the tea.
Uh-huh.
You say it's 2 cups, is that like for 2 people, or, because 2 cups is an awful lot to drink?
Oh, yeah, I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. And
The
it's,
golden milk.
Mhm. Of the milk, yeah.
Yeah, you wouldn't drink 2 cups of
That's
that.
a ton of coconut milk. Yeah, the kind of coconut milk I like, and again, there's lots of different kinds that are whole fat. I like the Native Forest brand, and they have an organic, and they have one that's I can't remember what it's called. It's without the guar gum in it, so it's literally only coconut milk. So guar gum is in a lot of coconut milks, and it makes it a little bit kind of heavy or sticky. And they took it out of this one because some people have problems with it, and so it's just a little bit less sticky, I guess.
So the
to
one,
say.
the coconut milk that's in the refrigerated section in the supermarket is not,
I would never bother with it. If you look at the nutrient content of the one in the can, there's like
Yeah.
700 calories in it, right? And then if you look at the nutrient content of the one, and well, the nutrients in it, whatever. And then if you look at the one that's in like the carton or the pourable thing, it's some small amount of, like it's almost the same or less than 1 can, but it has a ton of other things in it to make it homogenized so it pours like cow milk or dairy milk, and it's just not worth the chemicals.
right, it should
Is-
just be the coconut milk.
Yeah,
that's
and
it.
so because coconut milk is chunky when it comes out of a can, I usually put it in a little blender and just blend it and then stick it in a glass jar, and it just lives in my fridge for a few days until I use it up because I use it so fast. I like coconut milk. I don't love nut milks. I don't like almond milk or cashew milk or whatever those others. I've made them before. I just don't like them very much. And there's just not a lot of nourishment in them, but coconut milk is heavy and fatty, and I can use it in a ton of cooking things, and it feels really good. So I just use that way more. Some other people prefer other things, and some people actually have an allergy to coconuts and they can't have it. But I just really like that one. So it's just not worth the cartons because there's just not much there.
Okay.
That's all.
So you should look at the ingredients on the label, and that should tell you the story.
Yeah, and it's usually like coconut milk and like 95 other things.
No good.
It's just a lot of other stuff you don't need, and a lot of it's like these stabilizers and all kinds of other stuff.
Right,
You know.
it's too many syllables.
Yeah, exactly. So just keep it simple with that. And I like the Native Forest brand, but there are others that are fine. That's just the one that's my favorite. And I don't like it chunky, so I always put it in a blender. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on collagen protein? Like, is that similar to
I
having
think
beef broth every day?
It is. It's wonderful. I mean,
Okay.
that's where it comes from. Like
Right.
the companies that make it, like Great Lakes, and I mean, a variety of really
Yeah.
good companies now. That's where it comes from. And it's nice because you can dump it into like anything. You can stick it
And
in
it
coffee,
has-
you can
I can
stick it
put
in
it in
tea, you
tea
can
and
put it in
Yeah,
anything, and it just completely disappears and goes away.
yeah.
And it confers all the same benefit. And it's a nice protein source, so it's a little bit stabilizing for appetite, especially if you like have it in addition to breakfast stuff. Or whenever really. But I do like to put collagen with fat, because collagen is just protein all by itself. And protein doesn't occur anywhere in nature on its own. Like there's no source of protein alone. So like I like to put it with something else, whether it's with coconut milk or with soup or with whatever. I like it to come with fat. And so if I make even the electrolyte drink, you can dump it in there. But I would add oils to it also, so I have both the oil or the fatty acids and the collagen. They come from totally different sources, but you know, if you're using powdered collagen,
Yeah.
it's such an easy source of protein, and it's so soft. It just does such a nice job of so many things in the system to just provide you really nice raw materials. And oftentimes, like again, in the chiropractic office, like collagen comes to mind for me with patients because they have joint ligament injuries, and that's, you know, collagen repairs those, and that feels really good, along with, you know, making hair and nails and whatever beautiful. But yeah, I really like that. I like it to go along with fat. Yeah, any other questions? Yeah.
I do have a question. The bone broth, why do you bake, do you have to bake it first in the oven? Well,
Oh,
why-
to
why
bake
is that?
the bones.
Yeah,
You know what? It's just for flavor.
okay.
It's mostly for flavor. I decrease the temperature on that. A lot of times it's a roasting recipe for the bones that's at 450, and I don't really cook anything above 320,
Okay.
just to preserve the integrity of the fats
I've
in
never
all
done-
of the foods.
I've never done it that way, I've just put it in the,
You just stick it in and go.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's mostly for flavor, and to be honest, I will do it like via the recipe perfectly sometimes, but I usually do it your way, which is everything in, good luck, I'm going to bed, we'll see you in the morning. Yeah, I usually do it like that, just because the extra whatever hour or two to roast the bones, I just don't have. But, okay, but it's mostly for flavor, and I'm just not that picky.
If you roasted chicken, could you like use the carcass from the chicken?
Yeah, absolutely. And same thing with fish. Yeah, same thing with fish. Same thing with turkey. All of it.
Cause otherwise, where do you just buy bones?
Oh, at the grocery store. They'll always have them in the butcher section. They're really like in the last, I'll say, 5 years, they're way more accessible than they ever used to be. We kind of went through a time when everyone used them and then nobody used them, and now they're becoming more commonly used. And the butcher section, I'm convinced, is the best section at any grocery store ever. I love butchers because they're so willing to help. And so usually, if you want, you know, a certain cut of bone, or if you want more knuckles or more marrow or whatever, just ask them. Put in an order. Even at Wegmans and stuff like that. They
Do
usually
you have a preference,
apply.
what type of animal, what body part?
Not really. I like beef more than anything else, or I like red meat more than I like poultry and white meat. And because of that, I like a mixture of bones though. Like I like some knuckles and some marrow pieces, and some long bones and some kind of weird shapes of things. And you can usually get a pretty decent variety of stuff. But it depends on what you do best with. I prefer red meat over poultry and chicken because of the fatty acid profile, and I just feel better with it. It has more omega-3 fats, so the anti-inflammatory fats compared to the omega-6 inflammatory fats. So I personally do better with that. I like that, and I have a good reason for it. And I usually find that patients do better if they do a little bit more red than the whites and poultries. And part of that is because there's more fat in red meat naturally. Like people will often use chicken, but they'll have like this naked chicken breast with no skin on it and nothing else, and they don't add any fat to it. And again, it doesn't occur anywhere in nature like that. Like it came with organs and came with skin and came with fat. And we take all of that off, and then we have this piece of protein. Your body's like, well, that's great, but the problem is I'm made of fat. Like every one of our cells is lined in fat with some proteins and minerals. That's mostly what we're made of. And so I think we need to replace that with food, or from food.
So chicken noodle soup, it's the whole carcass, with bones in it.
Yeah.
Roughly intersect kind of.
Yeah.
support the human
Oh my
penis.
gosh, yeah, it's so good. You just have to fish out all those little tiny bones and be patient enough to grab them all. Yeah. Yeah, so any of those carcasses are great. I mean, if you fish a lot, same thing. You just use the fish. And they're amazing. It's so good for you. I don't have sources of fish bones, except I'm in the grocery store, but I don't cook a lot of fish because I usually make it stink, so I stick with other stuff. Even though I like it. Anything else about the recipes? Good there? Okay, good. If that's it, that's what we leave. Thanks so much. I hope you learned something.
Thank you.
Good. Yay.